For today's tabletop testing, we're going to be putting Dragapult EX up against Ogerpon EX. The Dragapult list in front of you is utilizing the Xatu engine with that clairvoyant sense, able to attach a basic psychic energy to one of your benched Pokemon. That's because Dragapult EX has a psychic plus fire attack cost in order to deal 200 damage to the active, as well as placing 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench in any way that you like. With such a versatile effect of an attack, there's no doubt that Dragapult can do a lot of sneaky math to get ahead in single prize matchups, as well as double down into some multi-prize basic Pokemon to make sure you're getting the most out of your attack. We have a fantastic draw engine alongside the Xatu with the Dracloak, the stage 1 in the list already. That's why you can see 4 copies in here, as well as just the 2 copies of Rare Candy. As we've seen with a number of stage 2 decks, we are incorporating an Arven build. That Forest Seal Stone is going to help us get into play, of course, alongside the Rotom V and Luminion V, so that we have access to that Forest Seal Stone and giving us additional consistency throughout the game. We're also utilizing TM Evolution in here to try and get multiple Xatu and Dracloak into play as quickly as possible, so that we can use these abilities to cycle through the deck. The ace spec of choice is Scoop Up Cyclone, because Dragapult EX has a beefy 320 hit points and no weakness. And thanks to Xatu being in the list, we can scoop up Cyclone into a Pokemon that has Rescue Board or possibly an energy that we could use to retreat, and then simply use Clairvoyant Sense and manually attach the Fire energy for the turn to get a Phantom Dive off after we've just picked up our Dragapult EX in one turn. And it's going to be coming up against the Ogerpon deck, where we have 4 of the Teal Mask Ogerpon with that Teal Dance. That's the entire build around of the archetype, because once during our turn we can attach a basic Grass energy to this Pokemon and draw 1 card. That doesn't count as your energy attachment for the turn, so we are trying to spam these and have as many Teal Mask Ogerpon in play as possible, and we're hoping that with our grass type coverage of the Ogerpon EX itself, we have a decent time into Charizard. With the Wellspring Ogerpon, we can really try and pressurize some basic engines by having a turn 1 Torrential Pump option. It sounds a little bit convoluted, but with the draw of Squawkabilly, Research, all of our Teal Dances, Radiant Greninja, and even the Pokestops, we should be able to come to some sort of situation where we can either discard the Wellspring Mask Ogerpon, use a number of Teal Dances, then Ogre's Mask into a Wellspring Ogerpon, as well as using energy switches, or simply bench the Wellspring Ogerpon, attach a Water Energy for turn, and energy switch twice off of our Teal Dance Ogerpon to get that rolling. There's also the Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX in the list to be an annoying walling Pokemon for certain archetypes, and I'm using that Blood Moon Ursaluna as a fantastic late game generic beat stick. I think that's one criticism of the Ogerpon deck. How it's built right now, it's certainly very speedy. However, I do think it really lacks that oomph. It doesn't have a huge high damage output option. There's also possibly some debate to having some Bravery Charms in the 60 and then also having the Fire Ogerpon in here, hoping that your basic EXs can tank, especially when they're using tools to buff their hit points. And in that case, you could turn into a Fire Ogerpon and look to get some response KOs. For now, though, I really wanted this Ogerpon list to just be proof of concept that we can be a really nice combo engine and create some crazy turn 1 situations. Let me know what you think about both deck lists and enjoy the games. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. So here we are getting into game 1. I'm going to be playing the Ogerpon deck on the left, and Jack is going to be piloting the Dragapult EX on the right hand side. And we're just getting set up here. Should be a pretty interesting one. I do have tempo at my disposal, whereas Jack has the sort of big setup late game that he's going to try and work towards. I force Jack first in this game 1. He starts with Tatsugiri and is going to look at the top 6 to try and find a supporter. Looks like that's a whiff from the off here. Not ideal. Obviously can't immediately use that card regardless, but it would be nice to just bank a supporter for the following turn. Didn't quite get to see what Bull Search is in Jack's hand, because he is shuffling up now, which means he might not have access to early Buddy Buddy Poffin, so it may just be what basics he has to get the game going. And let's see, yeah, double Dreepy in hand at the very least. I think it has an attachment as well, and is debating where to put that. It's going to be a fire attachment to the bench here. Certainly is debating it. Also a Psychic in hand. Eventually does just go with the fire to the bench. And looks like that's all he's got. So let's see what I can construct here. Have that Teal Mask Ogerpon in the active position. Obviously this deck is aiming to get some early game pressure, and you can see straight away that I'm nest balling out the Wellspring Ogerpon possibly here, because that is how I could take a 2 prize turn on the very first turn of the game. by dealing 100 damage to the active and 120 to one of the benched Pokemon, and Jack without Manaphy right now could be in trouble. In the very best case scenario, maybe I even bring another Dreepy up into the active position. That would be a high roll. But the whole idea here is with Squawkabilly, with Research, and with all of my Ogerpon draws, plus Pokestop, I can see a lot of cards. I'm going to start the turn with a Pokegear. Going to grab Iono to the hand. The big combo really involves grabbing lots of energy switches. We see a bug catching set going second, which means I'm mostly looking for grass energy and Ogerpon. That's exactly what I actually find, which is great. 2 in any combination is so versatile, certainly in a deck like this, where one of our main engine Pokemon, as well as the energy themselves, which almost counts as engine pieces, is really handy. We're going to start by getting 1 draw in with Ogerpon on the bench. I at least saw 1 energy switch, so that's pretty handy. Ooh, look at this. So I did have to Pokestop away Boss and Research, but it does give me access to the Prime Catcher. I'm straight away going to energy switch a grass over to the Wellspring, so I've made my intention pretty obvious here that I'm looking to get a turn 1 torrential pump off. I have Hisuian Heavy Ball, that gives me access to Radiant Greninja, that's a nice one to pull from prizes. My only single prize Pokemon, and of course giving me even more draw opportunities. I have Ultra Ball in hand, even more supporters are going here, but it's in favour of Squawkabilly EX. To see an additional 6. So I'm seeing 8 more cards at least here, maybe even 9 with more Ogerpon draw. I can continue to thin with Ball Search here from Nest Ball. Yeah, so now I could draw 10 more cards this turn. Well, actually, yeah, I've just squawked for 6, but I'm seeing at least a handful more cards here to see the combo. I saw Water Energy in the deck there, as the next Bud Catching set gets me Grass and another Ogerpon EX out. So I think really it's going to be down to if I can find Vessel. If the Water Energy is still in the deck, Vessel would be huge for me. I get to thin another 2 Grass Energy with the Bug Catching set here. So Greninja draw plus 2 abilities from our Ogerpon gives us a lot of cycle here, looking towards Vessel. There's Ogerpon drawing more energy switch in hand. That seems like a piece as well. Oh, and I think our last draw was actually the Water Energy, so I can energy switch attach. And we get the dream combination. I can KO 2 Dreepy on turn 1 with our Wellspring Ogerpon. That is what we're trying to do here with the low to the ground combo-based list. If nothing else, I can pressurize archetypes very nicely with early game attacks. And obviously against the evolving decks, the Wellspring is massive. It also shuffles those energy back into the deck to allow me to draw even more with Ogerpon EX in the future. So it does have pretty good synergy with the deck. As Jack's done a good job of re-establishing the board here with Buddy Buddy Poffin plus Arven. And it's probably just going to be ending on a TM evolution by the looks of things. He's debating what energy to search out with the Vessel here. Is his concern that he's already lost a Fire Energy and doesn't want to lose any more? Obviously, Psychic Energy has the benefits, as long as they stay in hand, to be used with Xatu later for additional draw. So he may be tempted to attach. He may be tempted to attach a Fire, but it's going to be a quick attract of customers and picks up an Iono. That's going to be a handy one for him next turn, most likely. Does end up committing the Psychic Energy, and it's just going to TM Evo into a couple stage 1s. He's going to go double Dracloak and pass things over to us. That means I think our best case scenario would be taking out the Natu on the bench. That would be a huge for us if we could find boss's orders there. Could be great. Possibly just also taking out a Dracloak is reasonable. I'm going to do a quick Ogre's Mask into, well, out of my water into a Grass Ogerpon. So now I'm getting all 4 abilities off this turn for just tons of draw and lots of energy coming onto the board. Going to see a turn attachment and energy switch, so I can at least attack here. Looks like I missed a gusting option. So we are just going to have to go for the Tatsu, which is a big relief for Jack there. I think if I take out Natu, I'm in... Well, I'm already in a pretty commanding position with 3 prizes up, but Jack can start mounting a comeback from this point on. We know he already has Iono, and he has a lot of draw here, potentially, with double Dracloak and likely a Xatu. So he should be cycling a lot of cards. Plus, this Ogerpon deck is a lot of low hit point 2 prizes. So Jack can make a comeback quite nicely if he can chain Dragapult from this point on in the game. We see another Vessel here. It's going to get a couple Psychic Energy. We know he has Fire in hand, of course. We do see the Xatu going to attach to a Dracloak. Jack's also picked up the rescue board, which is pretty important to move this mana fee, of course. Then Jack's going to evolve into that Dragapult. We see the fire attachments, also the rescue board, to the mana fee. And he can begin pressurizing here. Let's see who wants to put these 6 damage counters. It makes sense to sort of split them up a bit, because obviously I've got 2 10 hit points on lots of my Pokemon. So it's always going to be... Yeah, he's targeting the energy quite nicely and also putting 4 counters on the Squawkabilly, then puts him 2 6 damage counter droplets away from another easy 2 prizes. So all the damage makes sense there. This is where you're going to see one of the issues of the pure Ogerpon list. The list that I've constructed doesn't have a fire Ogerpon, so I can't just mask into that and take a KO on the Dragapult. I think if I were to play the fire one, this would be an obvious fantastic opportunity to do that and have some extra one-hit KO potential in the deck. But I think you're going to see that building the deck like this, where it's just maximum tempo and just all in on the ogres, means that we are lacking that damage output towards the later stages of the game. And we're getting to that point now where I've done pretty much all I can do, and I can draw cards, but there's not much I can like cycle towards that's helpful, to be honest. I can use Switch Cart, so I'm at least playing around Radiant Alakazam, taking prizes on that benched Ogerpon, and then I'm also going to heal 10 off the other Ogerpon. I'm going to swing an extra energy attachment on because it's 30 plus for each energy attached to both Pokemon. Doesn't always have to be grass, so you can put a 4th energy on a benched Ogerpon, which is nice. And it is just going to be setting up this 2-hit KO, which is a big risk because, as we know, Dragapult can play Scoop Up Cyclone, so if Jack can work towards Cyclone this turn, I'd have lost a lot of tempo, and the game's actually, despite my amazing start, starting to slip away a little bit. Jack's going to start things off with another Xatu, couple draws. Going to see Rod putting some Dreepy and a Fire back in. I think there's no doubt that he wants to draw towards Cyclone. If he already has access to Arven, it's a Barnstorming turn. I can definitely see some Iono in hand. Not sure if Arven's there. Oh, it's just going to be Iono. Interesting. Looks like he drew into Buddy Buddy Poffin, which is handy for him. As he did just cycle some Dreepy back into the deck. Going to be Dracloak first. Picks up Counter Catcher. That seems pretty handy here. That's actually a big piece, because now we can finish off this active Ogerpon just with damage counters from Dragapult. And yeah, he could be taking a 4-prize turn here, actually. So even without the... as he is just going to get double Dreepy with this Buddy Buddy Poffin. Oh no, he is just going to take that back and go back down to 1. I think he does have Radiant Alakazam in hand, maybe that's a reason. Yeah, that's why that's coming into play. We do see the Counter Catcher. It means he can take the more energy loaded Ogre. He's just going to Alakazam 1 off onto that one so that he can KO it with Dragapult, and he takes his 4 prizes whilst also setting up both my other Ogerpon to be KO'd cleanly. Jack has a massive hand size. Apologies for the quick bit of glare. I think we do fix this momentarily. We're quite lucky that my housemate Tim walked in at a pretty opportune time to us to catch the camera. So hopefully this gets fixed pretty quickly. Essentially, the main rundown is I need to find Iono this turn. If I can find Iono, I can hopefully limit Jack to have to find Fire plus Dragapult to win the game. If I can't hand disrupt though, I'm in a huge heap of trouble. I can obviously take this KO, go down to 1, and yeah, we do eventually fix the camera, which is nice. But yeah, I've just used a Vessel plus energy retrieval here, and I'm really digging towards Iono. I can retrieve more energy back, so I can get another draw in. And it really just comes down to, I think, if I can find this Iono, really. If I can, I'm in a reasonable spot. You know, Jack has Xatu and 1 Dracloak, but no guarantees of hitting EX plus fire. We're going to get a quick hit of the Pokestop, and we did mill an Iono, which is actually really bad for us. Do I still have 1 remaining in the deck to maybe Pokegear towards? No, I don't think I can... No, I just don't think I hit from the Ogerpon plus Radiant Greninja combo. I think I'm just done. The 1 damage counter spread means, yeah, we do just have to concede here. I can take the KO. Well, it's not concede. I take the KO and force Jack to have the cards, but with a hand size as massive as this, he should have no problem, right? He can, yeah, grab Rotom, Arven, Forest of Stone for the fire. Yeah, just get the attachment in, and he has access to EX and can just go in with the EX. So yeah, nice comeback. Despite a really strong start from the Ogerpon deck, Jack was able to make a big comeback. I think I'd be in a reasonable spot if I was able to Iono there. Just seems like I didn't have access to it in that last turn. And we're going to get into game 2. I'm going to kick things off, and I actually start with the Wellspring Ogerpon, which puts some pressure on Jack early to find an early Manaphy. But of course he is going second, so he has better outs towards that. Failing to threaten with Wellspring Mask, maybe just loading up as much energy as possible onto some Grass Ogerpon could also be handy here. Looks like I have early Water Energy, so just banking that to force Jack to have answers seems reasonable. And I think I'm quite content to hold the hand, actually, so I am just going to go for an E-Switch pass play. Really does just put Jack in a situation to get that Manaphy down. Even if he finds it, obviously that's a problem for me. But it's at least denying additional Dreepy from Jack, who has a ton of Ball Search, so may still be able to get away with this. Nest Ball coming in. Looks like it's grabbing Tatsu, perhaps. Jack's holding on to Energy Evo, so possibly just another Dreepy is best here. And just accept that you can go Evo into... Oh, it is going to be Tatsu. Interesting. Ah, so he already has the second Tatsu. That's why. Okay. So it gives him an opportunity after this Evo to go into Tatsugiri, which is probably your best user of Rescue Build. So that's a nice choice from him. As I'm going to go for the turn attachment onto Wellspring. So I guarantee a 1 prize turn here. And then just research the remainder of the hand away. I can Bug Catching set here. Picking up another Ogerpon and a Grass Energy. We're going to start drawing with Ogerpon. There's Blood Moon Ursaluna coming to the hand. Could have been useful in the last game as well as a tankier option for Jack to maybe have to gust around in the later stages, but didn't have access to it in that last game either. There's Radiant Greninja, another Teal Mask. But it looks like it's just going to have to be a Wellspring KO here. Jack's going to Vessel away Xatu and just pick up a couple Psych Energy. He's got a ton of draws here to work towards getting a Dragapult established. Going to start with the Xatu. Then we see the Dracloak. And then he's going to go Tatsu. Does hit Arven. So can also pivot the Tatsu here as well. Is that grabbing another Vessel? So I'm surprised he... oh, is he prized 2 Fire? Is that why he's had to Vessel 2 Psychics initially? Yeah, and then he's going to have to Vessel to then get a Psychic and a Fire. So it looks like he's prized 2. I think he never goes for double Psychic and never basically plays Rod just for a Fire Energy unless he's prized 2. So that could spice up the game a little bit, make it a little bit harder for him. Does he have access to Dragapult EX here? He must do, right? Yeah. Seems like he discarded 1 with Vessel. So he is going to come in swinging. It's a lot of pressure. 200 to the face. Counters to my other Ogerpon. And also swinging the 4 remaining on Radiant Greninja. As I'm going to kick things off with some Ogerpon draw here. The awkward thing with me taking a 1 prize KO with Wellspring, obviously I lose a bunch of my energy, but now I also don't want to attack with this Pokemon again, really. And if I put that to the bench, it's doing Jack a massive favour. So that's why, well, we see at least 1 energy switch. I could be doing that just to pay retreat as well, of course. I go for an Ultra Ball here. Possibly a mistake to not just go heavy for another Grass Ogerpon. Because I think I've actually prized 2. But it wasn't something I was checking too much. I'm going to get the Blood Moon in the mix, though, and then just go for Iono. The only good news, really, is that Jack's gone pretty high tempo and hasn't fully established his board just yet. I can Pokestop. I can get my turn attachment onto Ogerpon. But yeah, it means I can come in and swing, but leaving this heavily damaged Wellspring is so bad for me because it's basically feeding Jack 4 prizes. I have to really hope that I can go Iono again next turn, basically. Because without that, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Jack starts the turn pretty ideally with Buddy Buddy Poffin. Definitely needs additional Dreepy in the mix here. Even has Counter Catch. He's going to go for the Blood Moon Ursaluna, which is interesting. So he gave up on the choice to take 4 prizes this turn to try and trap my high retreat cost Blood Moon Ursaluna. I'm not sure how many switch cards have already been played, but I think that's probably something I'm checking right now. I think I still have a couple in the deck, but I don't think it's bad for Jack to have done this play, though, because if he goes down to 4, even with Tatsugiri and Xatu on board, it's a lot to ask for him to find like a candy combo and keep up a chain of Dragapult. Now if he makes this play, he can take a couple prizes, or just do this whole thing where if I go for Disruption, he is still drawing 6 cards and he can re-establish. But yeah, he's just going to take the 2 prizes. I think this is fine, whilst also forcing me to have switch cards at the very least. But it just means he's a lot less wrecked by Iono at this point. The only good news is I can heal this Blood Moon out of range of just sprinkle damage from Dragapult. So that's one thing going for me. I can Vessel out a couple Grass Energy. And I'm going to start drawing with our Ogerpon. I'm having a quick count of what's in deck before debating on this Poker Gear. Looks like we fail it altogether, which is a shame. I think, again, it may have been a situation where I was looking for Iono there. We do have Switch Card in hand, though, so I can move this Blood Moon. Get a manual attachment in on the bench. And we're just going to swing and finish off this Dragapult. Jack's position is pretty decent. As long as he can find a candy this turn, I think he's in a good spot. Oh, he's actually holding on to rare candy. That could be huge. Also, we have to remember that if he was able to take... Was he able to take Fire Energy from prizes? Don't think he was. But he does have second Super Rod in hand. So reloading Fire Energy is going to be really important here. That's something he has to really be careful of. Yeah, there's the Fire Energy going back into the deck. So he has to find his one of Fire Energy this turn. Wow, that's not going to be easy. He may have to accept a 70 damage prod turn, or just have a all one prize board this turn. Maybe just buy as much time as possible. Oh, looks like he has double candy in hand if he's finding Draga EX here. A 70 damage poke means that he plays around switch carts to an extent. Xatu going to draw him a couple additional cards here. There's at least one Dracloak in hand. He's going to use that now for some draw. There's Alakazam. That can get cheeky. He's banked a lot of damage across the game. Start putting damage counters back onto Blood Moon here with Radiant Greninja. He's actually just going to Nest Ball. He's having a quick look through some resources. It's just going to be a fail. Then it's going to be the Arven. So you can grab Forest and Ultra Ball. Wait, does he just win here? Rotom Forest can find the Fire Energy. And then he can go Candy Draga. Well, it's the best case scenario at least. Even if he can't win here, right? He can put a ton on the Blood Moon. And yeah, oh, that's actually it, right? 6, 12, 18. I'm at 23. But what can I do, really? I can't KO this Dragapult. I got 3 prizes to take. Yep, we're done here. If I can't deal with the Dragapult, it's just game at that stage. So it is going to be Dragapult taking 2 victories over the Ogerpon deck. I really just wanted to see how the Turbo Ogerpon went, because it's obviously had not many results in Japan. But I just wanted to see how effective a low-to-the-ground turbo engine could be, and also I think we saw some pretty obvious flaws with the archetype there, in that it does fizzle and its damage output just is lacking quite a bit. We didn't even see Jack have to use Scoop Up Cyclone at any point, but I feel like that would have been a game-ending card in a number of situations there as well. So let's get into some other options for both decks. We'll start off with other options for the Dragapult deck. Obviously, this is a Xatu engine, and I feel like there will be enough spotlight on a pure Pidgeot list as well, which is quite significantly different. So we're going to stick with what I think is worthwhile in a Xatu engine of the Dragapult deck. First of all, some more sort of fringe supporter cards are quite interesting. The Mela giving you additional means of recovering Fire Energy, and it does just mean that even with Xatu not in play, you can still burst a Dragapult into play out of nowhere. It's one of these cards where you really don't want to play more than one copy, but if you're already playing Luminion, and I suppose Tatsugiri to an extent as well, the Mela could be pretty handy. The Lance supporter is interesting. I think that Buddy Buddy Poffin is just such a powerful item card that we don't need to have a supporter like this, but at the same time, this doesn't have the same diminishing returns of Buddy Buddy Poffin, because it can be useful in the mid-game to find additional Dracloak and, of course, your Dragapult EX. So again, not really a card you want to play super high counts of, but I do foresee there being situations where it could be a decent Luminion target, or again, a decent Tatsu play, basically on those off turns where you don't really see the value of Arven, like towards the mid to late game. I feel like the Lance can sometimes be handy. In terms of denying prize cards, because we are using Rotom and Fish in this build, certainly could expect the sort of things that we've seen in Charizards and Gardevoirs of old, with that Collapse Stadium as a one-off stadium choice, or also having the Professor Churro in here to pick up some Pokemon similar to the Scoop Up Cyclone, of course. You could also attempt a Churro if you're willing to change your A-Spec, of course, as just being a different option. And if there are going to be controlling or Snorlax-based variants, I do think we are a little bit light on those sorts of pivots, and I think it could be reasonable for opponents to out-resource you if you don't start playing supporters like this, so always something that I have in the back of my mind. There are a couple other interesting A-Spec options in here. Prime Catcher is like a pseudo-switching card in a similar way that Scoop Up Cyclone already is, and we know how important it is for Dragapult to finish off Pokemon with its sprinkle damage, and by pushing a heavily damaged Pokemon to the bench, that is one of the most powerful things you can do as Dragapult. So having your Boss's Orders, your counter catchers, and additionally Prime Catcher could be massive. A sort of low-key tech as well could be Iron Bundle for a similar reason. A lot of the time you don't care what your opponent gives you, it's more about pushing away a heavily damaged Pokemon so you can finish it off with 6 damage counters on the bench. So either of these could be reasonable inclusions just to make sure you're getting the most out of that. Even just doubling up to 2 counter catcher is reasonable within the list. And on Unfair Stamp is a great way to punish aggressive archetypes. We saw that the Ogerpon deck was able to exert a decent amount of pressure and typically began a prize race, so immediately putting those down to lower hand sizes could be a really big deal against like Miraidons and future hands, the sort of archetypes that we're expecting to be relatively reasonable in the format. You can certainly punish those pretty early, and the Unfair Stamp is obviously Arven searchable, so another great card to consider in the deck list compared to that Cyclone, which I think is much more of like a mirror tech card, whereas the Unfair Stamp is going to be helpful in the sort of anti-aggro matchups, I suppose you could say. Talking about some cool one-of item cards, there's also a smorgasbord of items that could make their way in the deck as one-of counts because we are playing that Arven package. Heavy Ball, obviously a reasonable option if we have, you know, one Radiant Pokemon, Manaphy, Tatsu, these sorts of things. Even just having an extra search card for Natu or something like that. You can even gain a space by playing a 1-1 Xatu line that's sometimes showing up in Japan, and by having Heavy in the list, you can at least get your Natu out of those prizes that little bit easier. Switch, again, if we're just worried about the amount of switch outs in the deck, you can add that to the deck list. Even just a second copy of Rescue Board is something I've certainly considered within the list. Lost Vacuum for a lot of disruption, can remove some hit point buffing tools, which can be a big deal, as well as some damage modifying tools, which may be an issue for you if we're trying to stay out of range and rely on our Scoop Up Cyclone. And E-Hammer, a little bit more searchable than the Temple of Sinnoh, going to be especially important if you respect that Lugia matchup, and possibly if there are going to be Neo Upper Energy mirror matches where your opponent's playing a Pidgeot list, E-Hammer could also be a really big deal there. And then finally, Radiant Charizard, certainly a powerful card, and it finds its way into all sorts of deck lists all the time, may be a little bit more worthwhile than Radiant Alakazam. Alakazam can be really handy in a ton of spots, definitely good against 220 hit point basic EX decks where you can basically take mid-turn prizes by finishing them off by painful spooning onto one of those 220 hit point Pokemon. Also can be really useful against like 70 and 80 hit point basic attacking decks, possibly even like Dragon Mirrors once again, where you put 6 counters onto a Dreepy and then you can painful spoon one on to like finish it off from a different Pokemon. So the Alakazam's definitely versatile, but Radzard is a really great late game one prize beat stick, and as we know with things like Charizard EX, that the Radzard can be a very valid inclusion, especially when you are slamming hand disruptors towards the later stages of the game. This can just be a win condition card in itself. And then the Defiance Band also can be a great way to defend yourself against some aggressive low to the ground basic attacking decks. Certainly the likes of Miraidon and Future Hands, Roaring Moon, these sorts of archetypes where you can reach that 230 threshold pretty early on and have that instant response can be massive, because I feel like Dragapult can be quite vulnerable to an Iron Hands running away with the game if there is too much tempo at its disposal and it's not answered immediately. I think that can be sometimes an issue for the Dragapult deck, so incorporating an Arven searchable tool, obviously, to give yourself that response is a pretty nice option to have in the list. And then we get to Ogerpon. It seems clear from the City League data, the Champions League results, that Ogerpon on its own can't really be its own archetype. I was initially expecting there to be this sort of low-to-the-ground pure Ogerpon list. Admittedly, I didn't try the Fire Ogerpon in the 60, which may have added to some damage output in certain situations. Maybe you play like a lot of Bravery Charm in the list and hope that you can get tanking turns, and then suddenly you can convert into a Fire Ogerpon and response KO and stuff, ideally uptrading into EX Pokemon, but what looks like probably the better option is just using the Teal Mask Ogerpon to be a great engine Pokemon for some other attacking decks that have much more impressive upside. For example, Raging Bolt EX alongside Sada, and also weaving in some Grass Energy into your list allows the Bellowing Thunder to be a much higher tempo version of itself right now, where the Sandy Shocks is only really useful in the sort of mid to late game, whereas in this case we could really front load so much damage in the opening stages with our Ogerpon, whilst additionally drawing cards through the deck. I imagine there's going to be an awkward energy count here with a low count of lightning and fighting, but then having to also have a ton of grass in the 60. But on paper it looks a lot more aggressive and consistent than the Sandy Shock that was kind of initially given to us. I'm also very interested in Regidrago V-Star. This card's always sort of been on the outside looking in, never really being consistent enough to be a high performer. But we gain Dragapult EX, which is another fantastic dragon Pokemon to copy, and we gain this additional draw engine / energy acceleration option. If we play these Ogerpon plus energy switch combos, we can finally go away from the awkward like Gardenia's options, or having it alongside Arceus where you just have slow tempo and you just have to basically jump through more hoops than an Arctina ever did. So now I actually feel like there could be a Drago deck that has these insane selling point dragon Pokemon and finally a low to the ground engine that can make it work. Yes, you're going to be a multi-prize deck basically entirely apart from possibly a Radzard, And yes, you are going to have lots of low hit point, easy bench sitters, but I do feel like the Dragos themselves can cause such a threat with the use of Dragapult EX and Goodra in single prize matchups, and then having Giratina V-Star and Raging Bolt EX for the multi-prize matchups, or creating one-hit KO options, that the Regidrago is definitely an archetype that I'm once again going to be looking into. Then looking at just pure grass stuff, the Sinistra and Sinistra EX from the new set could be pretty interesting with Ogerpon. The Matcha all-out attack discards 3 grass energy from your Pokemon in play, dealing 70 for each, so you are dealing 210. Not a great number to be hitting, of course, but you can try and buff that a little bit more with some tools and whatnot, and it should be a pretty low to the ground, easy to play archetype that obviously takes use of bug catching set really nicely in the list, and at the very least you're always throwing single prize Pokemon into the mix to try and cause headaches for your opponents. And the Sinistra EX has a decent damage counter placing option in the sort of mid to late game. And then also possibly interesting is Toadscruel EX. This card has popped up now and again as a random tech inclusion, but could be the star of the show. If we fill our bench with Teal Mask Ogerpon EX, we're naturally buffing our Colony Rush attack to decent damage output, really. It could easily be KOing basic EX Pokemon at the very least, and has reasonable type coverage, as we know, and with that protective Mycelium ability, you could actually be fairly decent into Dragapult. If you have a couple healing cards at your disposal, you're really denying their main selling point, which is their damage counter placement. So yeah, it could also be an interesting one to keep an eye out for. Let me know your thoughts on both decks. What's your favorite way to play Dragapult, and what's going to be your favorite partner with Ogerpon? I'll hear it all down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back for another video tomorrow. Cheers.